the right's favorite welfare rancher is back in the spotlight. Yes, Cliven Bundy has ignited a new firestorm, this time causing some of his supporters, like Rand Paul, to back away. Now, what could possibly make Bundy supporters into detractors, especially those who would call him a hero for the American, the regular American man? Well, in his daily news conference on Saturday, Bundy, now more or less ignored by the mainstream press, save for Sean Hannity and other cheerleaders at Fox News, said something incredibly racist that was later published this week in the New York Times. So what did he say? Well, he said, quote, "I want to tell you one more thing I know about the Negro." Yes, whenever you use the words the Negro, it does not turn out well. He said, now, this was in the New York Times, so I'm quoting verbatim. The rancher began as he described a quote-unquote government house in Las Vegas, where he recalled that all the people who sat outside seemed to have, quote, nothing to do. He continues with saying what he said during that conference. Quote, and because they were basically on government subsidy, so now what do? They abort their young children. They put their young men in jail because they never learned how to pick cotton. And I've wondered, are they better off as slaves, picking cotton and having a family life and doing things? Or are they better off under government subsidy? They didn't get no more freedom. They got less freedom. To which I say, they got less freedom? Slaves. Black people now, according to Bundy, have less freedom than during slavery, where you could be bought and sold, whipped, raped, and killed because you were nothing but property. That's somehow more freedom than being on a government assistance program? By the way, the government house anecdote is one. How did he know it was a government house? He didn't. He assumed these people were on welfare simply because they were black. And here's my other point. So when black people sit on their porch, it's because they have nothing to do, which is code word for calling them fucking lazy. Now, I didn't know that sitting on your porch with your family was a quote-unquote black thing, and that it meant you had nothing to do. Bundy assumed that you're lazy, but I bet he's never seen the study where black names actually would get less job callbacks than white-sounding names for the same exact resume. You know what that's called? That's called institutional racism. My last point before I open it up to the panel is about entitlement. Now, because these statements fit perfectly into the entitlement narrative that the right often uses against people of color, Bundy feels entitled to graze on public land that's owned and managed by the government. And Bundy feels entitled to not have to pay the grazing fees instituted by Ronald frickin' Reagan, even after he had his day in court twice. And so this guy has the gall to talk about government subsidy. Now, what do you guys think about this?
Well, for me, I feel a bit sorry for the right wing and people at Fox News, because every time they pick a hero to champion some cause, whether it's George Zimmerman for kind of stand your ground laws and Second Amendment rights, or now it's Clive Bundy for it being against federal oversight or whatever, every time they pick a hero, they turn out to be racist. And you can just see as soon as that person does or says something racist, the rest of the Republican Party going, stupid, 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 why did we pick him as our hero for this issue? And the reason why so many of their heroes end up being racist, because the Republican Party, a lot of their base are racist, and this is something that they're not going to be able to escape from. Now, with Bundy saying these racist comments, he has a lot of his previous supporters have now said, oh, yeah, that's outrageous. Even Sean Hannity, he had his arm twisted behind his back and was forced to say, yeah, I don't agree with his comments. But even with this backlash, they're secretly thinking, damn it, why can't we just have a sane hero? And the problem is in the Republican Party, there aren't that many sane people left in it.
Exactly. Sean, Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, some excellent points there. I'm not gonna lie. I love the fact that if these grazing fees are tied to Reagan, like you mentioned, that's just another awesome
executive order by Reagan.
Okay, well, Federal grazing districts were actually established in 1934, and Las Vegas established theirs in 1936. So grazing, I don't, maybe these particular ones go back to Reagan, but the idea of grazing fees is close to a century old, older than Bundy himself. To what Steven said, like, a lot of these heroes turn out to be racist because a lot of these people championing them are racist. It is so weird. You know, I want to get away from the fact that, obviously he's the welfare farmer. The reason why he's in the news is because he's refusing to pay for public land that he is profiting from, which is, the definition of a handout. But even if he wasn't doing it, like, even if he paid his grazing fees or whatever, like, he's still a farmer. And we've covered this on this show before, and I've defended it because I don't have a problem with it. You guys not so much. But farming is subsidized in America. So even if it wasn't for this, he's still receiving a huge subsidy. That's what his life is built around, is an industry that, right or wrong, is built on subsidies. Now, I guess the implication here is that he is assuming, whether he knows it to be true or not, that these people don't work for their handout. And to be fair, that is a distinction. Working in a subsidized industry and getting money for nothing are not the same thing. But don't criticize subsidies while you're receiving subsidies, and certainly don't criticize subsidies while you're receiving one illegally and threatening to get your women shot so you can keep paying a little bit less to keep grazing your cattle on land that you've got this spurious claim to. The whole thing, the reason, he's been claiming that this land, his family's claiming this land goes back to the 1870s. I want to, because we are a fact-based show, if you'll give me permission to go slightly off topic for 20 seconds here, I want to do a screen share. This is the deed of sale to the Bundy family when they purchased the land in question, and the date there is January 1948. That's how long they've had the claim to this land, all grazing issues aside. So everything about this guy, he's a despicable person. He's a liar, and he doesn't care who gets hurt, so he can keep getting his grazing for free.
All right, Sean and then Daniel, you guys are, I'm assuming, a little bit more on Bundy's side, or at least against the federal government. So get your 2 cents.
Well, I mean, this story isn't really about the whole Bundy issue. It's about his, horribly racist comments. So I'm just going to get into 2 things. One, anytime you go up against the federal government or you stand up against anybody, I don't care if you're on the left or the right, people are going to go through your past and try and find things, right? And in this case, they didn't even have to do that because Bundy is a bad guy. I might have, technically agreed with him on, certain aspects. I don't think they should have, just taken his cows like that. I don't think, people exaggerate when they say they came there with guns, they were going to shoot. They came there with guns because there's an open carry. It's an open carry state, and they came from their gun club meeting, which is where people who are conservative, who like guns, would meet before going to a protest. So, all those issues aside, you can't say this stuff and still have people on your side. And it's actually good that people are backing away from him. All the legal issues and any legal sympathy that you have or might not have had for him goes out the window when he just starts spouting this crap off. So, and by the way, the word Negroes, seriously?
Yeah. All right, Daniel.
Well, I agree with Sean that a lot of the people, and even some of the militias, are kind of abandoning Mr. Cliven Bundy. But a lot of them are actually claiming that they didn't do it for Cliven Bundy. They kind of did it as a form of them putting their foot down regarding the Patriot Act and the NDAA and so forth. But as far as Cliven Bundy, you give him a soapbox and you start to see his true colors, and he stood on the soapbox, and now people are rather wary.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I kind of want to go to a little bit of a point of, I guess, where I could sort of sympathize with Bundy. Yeah, I know, right? But hey, hear me out. The whole idea of grazing on federal land, and this is getting a little bit back to the whole, away from his racism, which is incredibly blatant. But the whole idea of grazing on federal land was a federal idea to get people to come out to ranch in the West. The deal is we let you use federal land for free, and you come out and you take advantage of it. You use it, no strings attached. Okay, so somewhere along the line, that changed. The government became more interested in conservation, which I think is great. I'm all for conservation, but that's shitty for the ranchers. And so to pay for that conservation, Reagan issued an executive order putting in those grazing fees. Now, as Jordan pointed out, there were the idea of grazing fees, and there were grazing fees before Reagan, but Reagan made a national, he put out an executive national order saying that these grazing fees need to be in place. And these fees, everybody paid it but Bundy. So that said, basically what I'm getting down to is you can't ignore those fees for 20 years and not expect a response, even if the whole reason that you have to pay those fees was kind of shitty.
I think that's true, but at the end of the day, this story today has come out that he's racist, and as Sean said, you didn't need to dig up this guy's past. He had his own press conference, and he said these things just today. But this story today, combined with all the other previous stuff, anyone who's defending Cliven Bundy now they're essentially just defending a racist criminal. He hasn't paid his taxes. He should be in jail for doing that, and he's a horrible racist. Anyone defending him is defending a racist criminal. It's as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that we report the facts straight. The government didn't just come after this guy's cattle. He's been in arrears for years. They've taken him to court. He threatened to shoot them whenever they took him to court. And then whenever he didn't pay and they didn't collect what the court ordered he should pay for years, then they came after his cattle. By the way, that is both, one, how repossession works, and two, incredibly lenient compared to almost every other repossession case I've ever heard. And three, they still didn't take the cattle, which are still on federal land, because he launched an armed standoff. It's ridiculous. The guy, there's nothing pro this guy that you can possibly say.
Well, the thing that I'll point out, since we're kind of getting into the case of it, it's basically when a lot of the Western states joined the Union. As a part of them joining the Union, they had to turn over their land to the federal government, right? So the federal government owns like 85% of the state of Nevada. Now, because farmers wanted to be part of the states, but they didn't want to not pay the government fees, they had an agreement that this land was to be used for grazing. Like you could be able to use it, and they kind of changed the rules later. And the idea that Ted Bundy is the only is his name Ted
Cliven,
Bundy?
his name's Cliven, actually.
Oh shit, that's the serial killer. The idea that Bundy is the only man who didn't pay, and that somehow makes him bad. Like if the law, you perceive the law as unjust, it doesn't matter how many people follow the unjust law. Like we make heroes out of people, the one person to disagree with laws. But that's in in the weeds of the case. Obviously this guy's super racist, and he said this at his own press conference, and I'm pretty sure he just said this stuff. They didn't ask him a question that set him up for it.
Right. And another thing that he mentioned, too, is that apparently later on, facing this whole controversy and trying to play the I'm not racist but card, he decided to mention that he didn't have any problem with Mexican families. Oh, they're good. Oh, okay. Well, that's nice of you to come out with that later.
So we need a TYT Nation poll on who's the worst person, Ted Bundy, Clive Bundy, or Al Bundy. I think that would be an excellent segment that we should have on another show.
You know what? Let's leave it up to our audience to decide. I mean, leave your comments. Who's worse? Who's more of a horrible person? And make sure to leave your comments about that.